Welcome everyone to tonight's task seminar. My name is Rebecca McKinney and I'm chairing tonight. So just a teeny bit of housekeeping before I introduce Martha. As with all of our task seminars, we really welcome this as a space for people to share voices and opinions and sort of ideas, but also take responsibility collectively for making sure that the chat and the commentary is respectful of each other and compassionate and curious. So to come in with that, what we're looking at tonight is Martha's going to speak to us for around about 40 minutes or so. And there'll be some time for conversation, questions after that, taking us up till about 6 o'clock. Martha's also said she's happy to take some questions or respond to some comments in the chat through the talk, but obviously we don't want to interrupt her flow too much. So if anything comes up that feels like it, needs a response, so we'll try and flag that up a little bit. And that'll take us up till about 6 o'clock. We'll take a little short comfort break for about 5 minutes, and then we'll have some just community space as usual afterwards till about 6:30. All right, so I am so pleased tonight and just really excited to welcome Martha Pollard to this task seminar. A little bit about Martha. She's a person-centered counselor based in the Scottish Borders. She's a counseling trainer. She's a mindfulness teacher. And she's currently working on a doctorate at Edinburgh University, exploring freedom and caring experiences from a human rights and liberation theology perspective. She's also a trustee on the board of COSCA, representing the research area of interest. And she's a dear friend of mine too. So I'm really happy to welcome her tonight. Tonight, she's going to be speaking to us about her research findings from a qualitative study of family and staff carer perspectives, particularly carers of people living with dementia, although her research applies probably, and some of the themes that have arisen from the research would apply more broadly. And this is focusing on the meanings of freedom and caring. So when carers talked about what freedom means to them, they give multiple examples from the context of their experiences in caring. And these themes that are arising from the conversations are around common humanity and common solidarity. And these are themes that are really significant, I think, to all of us here in Task. A lot of our conversations through the emails, through the WhatsApp group, really connect us in with our own common humanity and community solidarity. So I'm very much looking forward to hearing what Martha has to share with us tonight. I'm not going to talk anymore. I'm going to turn us over to Martha and off we go. Oh, and just to say as well, the meeting is being recorded. We won't record the community space, but we'll record the meeting up until that point. So if you unmute yourself, you will be included in the recording unless you choose to ask online events to edit you out later. The online events team are here tonight. Jeff is looking after the tech side of things, so any problems there, give a flag up to them and off we go, I suppose.
Thank you, Rebecca. Really grateful. And really delighted to be here and for the invitation to discuss this with the people who are here in this way. I've had a chance now to talk about my findings in various settings, and people who are working in hospitals, people working in care homes, and also in some community-based settings. And it's a really interesting widening of the conversation with each of those groups that I speak to and what they bring. So I'm really looking forward to hearing how this sits with you in your own experience, how it connects, and our group thoughts about where it could lead and where it can be helpful. So I'm really looking forward to that. So thank you to the Task Network and Rebecca, to your invitation to join this conversation on therapy and social change. I'm going to share some slides with you. So is that looking all right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, great. I'm really glad to be able to share with you some findings that are emerging from my research. And the focus is on this common humanity and community solidarity, which have emerged really as the overarching themes of what connects with freedom and in caring. I'm working in the University of Edinburgh on my thesis with the Alzheimer's Scotland Dementia Research Centre, and also with the Edinburgh Centre for Research on the Experience of Dementia and the University Chaplaincy. And between them, I've had absolutely great support and encouragement and challenge to be able to make sense of the research that we planned and the research findings that have come through. My interest from the beginning of my research, which actually started quite a few years ago now, because I first started my part-time PhD in December 2018, and I was interested in this question of freedom and what freedom means within the context of dementia and caring. Why was I interested in that? Well, we as human beings value freedom of having control over and being able to live our lives in the way that we choose. And also, from 2013 onwards, I was involved in care work and community support, and also within my own family. I heard impacts and saw impacts of dementia diagnosis and dementia experience on freedom and caring. And I wanted to learn more about upholding freedom and started my part-time studies in 2018. And at that time, I was still working in dementia and care support within a charity. And so we got going designing the project that I intended to do, which was going to be in association with specialist dementia care units in hospitals, which are secure units, and was going to involve people with dementia as well as staff carers and family carers in that. And that was underway. And then the pandemic arrived in 2020. And of course, that involved widespread loss of freedoms and really major impacts in dementia caring. So the question became really live when I was speaking to people about their experiences. So the methods of my study, I'm using a methodology in qualitative research. So I'm talking with people, and I was and gathering their words and gathering their insights, and using a methodology called frenetic iterative analysis, which is a mouthful, and which I was really glad to come across. And it's a methodology described by Sarah J. Tracy, who's an academic based over in Wisconsin, I think. She's a qualitative specialist, and she works with all sorts of different kinds of qualitative methods. And this one, frenetic, referring to practical wisdom, really. So it's both about the practical nature of how she deals with the data, and also about the practical outcomes that are intended for the data. And iterative is just about that it's a back and forth process. You can't do this analysis all at once. It has to go in stages. You find something out and then go back and look at the transcripts and learn something again. And I'm very happy to say more about that if people have questions about it as we go or in the discussion later. And what I was doing was exploring meanings of freedom. And the people that I worked with, so I redesigned my project over about a year, and who I was speaking to were family carers and also care staff who were in a wide range of different roles. So all of the interviews that I did were conducted remotely by Microsoft Teams, and I did 22 in-depth one-to-one interviews of about an hour each. There were more women than men who took part, and 13 of them were family carers, 6 of them were men, and 7 were women. And 3 of those women who were family carers also worked in a staff care role of some kind. And there were 9 care staff, and all of them were women who worked in a range of roles and settings. And I was really fortunate and grateful to have the help of the Enrich Network, which is involved in research in care homes and helped me contact people working in those settings. And also NDCAN, which is the National Dementia Carers Action Network of Alzheimer's Scotland, who helped put me in touch with people who are in family caring roles who might like to take part. So what did I do? I'm going to talk through a bit of the process that I went through. So there was interview arrangement and consent for taking part. It was an online interview, which I audio recorded these interviews. So although we were speaking on a video medium, what I was doing was audio recording using a digital recorder so that it wasn't recording their faces. Once all of that was recorded, there was transcription of it so that it could be in readable form. And in doing that, each names were pseudonymized so that I will use names when sharing excerpts, but they're pseudonyms. So these aren't people's real names that are used. And for the analysis part, I was systematically reading and rereading of the transcripts, doing different things with them each time, which I'll say a little bit about in a moment. And so there were kind of 3 overall stages to the analysis. The first was primary psychocoding. And the coding process is basically like flagging or tagging the transcripts with something that seems important to capture. In my primary psychocoding process, this actually involved individual words that people used, and they might be emotion-focused words, like somebody might have said upset, or horrible or joyful, or so it was something that really captured something important. So that was the individual words that people said. In my secondary psychocoding, then was moving into capturing wider phrases and ideas, and that was what I was calling sub-themes. So this could be like emotion focused type areas that people were talking about, or it might have been talking about practical focus type areas and a wide range of other sub-themes. And I'll say a bit about them as we go through as well. And then the third stage of the process is the analytic or iterative coding, reaching the meta themes. So these are the things that are the overarching themes that seem to connect all of those sub-themes together. And I'll share a bit more about what I did, so you can kind of get an idea of the process. So this picture in this top left-hand corner is one of the first stages where I'm reading transcripts and making initial notes of things that I notice, and I'm actually writing on those transcripts themselves. This is an example of one of the tables that I was making in terms of the words that people were using, and it's a rough count, not of the whole number of words altogether in the thesis, but of the number of times these particular words were used across unpaid carers, who are on the left column here, and the paid carers on the right-hand side. So the count in qualitative research may or may not be of interest. I was most interested in the differences between paid and unpaid carers, just to see if there was a kind of difference in what types of things people were talking about or things that were emerging. But it's actually the meaning of it more than the numbers of it in the way that I did my analysis that led to the overarching themes. You get an idea here. So the word kind, for example, is used 135 times by unpaid carers and 189 times by paid carers. People talk about locked, lockdown, locks, it's a fair amount of the time. And the word need appears. Now I'm talking to people about meanings of freedom, and they're telling me about needs. right? So 253 times unpaid carers talk about needs, and 137 times in all the transcripts where paid carers are talking about needs. So it's flagging up things that are important, and I was beginning to get an overall idea of what kind of was really there. And then I would look at wider paragraphs, like, I had a way of speaking where I did most of the talking, and I'm highlighting, words that flagged up that seemed really important to capture. So this is, a particular person talking about their experience. And then the table that you see just below that is what I did to kind of work with this particular bit of text. It was actually a bit more text than you're seeing just there, of what the category was, of the type of material that I'm capturing, the word, which in vivo means actually in the text. So happy is used here, created opportunities, difficult, outrageous. And then things that were a kind of positive sense, creating opportunities. Talking is quite difficult, so this is showing empathy. Negative sense, things were outrageous demand on my mother, right? And then things that are maybe a bit ambiguous. Can't tell without the context whether talking about I was quite happy to wait or I was perfectly happy mean anything about whether she was actually happy. So this is how things were kind of broken down to, again, just really dive into what's really there in what people are talking about. And over here on this right-hand side is something you can't read, but these are sub-themes emerging. And for each of those, the sub-themes, I would have this column here on the left is the unpaid carers, is on the right is the paid carers, and I'm capturing whole excerpts of something that is an example of the particular sub-theme that I'm capturing. Just pausing here for a moment in case anybody has anything they wanted to ask or. Okay. One of the things that has been a part of the qualitative research process as well is that, researcher journaling. So that I'm kind of working back and forth with the data of how am I responding to what I'm seeing arising, both maybe in the interviews themselves, and in other things to do with dementia care, and how is that maybe impacting how I'm reading the information, and how I'm located in relation to it, so that I can say something about that in my research write-up. So, this is a journal extract from October 2022, where I'm reading stuff about the National Care Service Forum that was on the road, and Kevin Stewart talking about the messages of that, and the words that, that politicians, government sometimes use about it, saying we want this to come from people's lived experience. And we do. And people living with dementia and carers want policy to be formed out of their experience for sure. What's not clear always when that comes back from a politician is what did you mean by lived experience, and lived experience of what, and how can the National Care Service account for differing needs? So this is, things that I'm responding to that are helpful for me to record, so that I can weave that into my analysis process too. This is a really messy diagram. And I will tidy it up in a moment, and the tidied up one will make more sense of it. But I wanted to show you a bit of the mess first, because qualitative research process is kind of a mess, really, or at least it felt like that to me, until it starts to make sense. I was finding it a bit overwhelming, and I got stuck several times. And what happened eventually, as I was making sense of the sub-themes that were arising, was that I was trying to see if I could put it down somewhere and have a look at the patterns that I thought I was seeing in the collective wisdom of what everybody was telling me. So right here in the center is really perhaps the overarching experience that people shared with me. And that I'm calling systemic invisibility, or inequalities in freedom. So this is the propensity of systems and structures in society not really to see people with dementia or carers or their experience to be unheard. And systemic invisibility showed up both in unpaid carers who were over here on the left and also in the paid care staff experiences. And what is on the bottom of my diagram here, which I'm calling aggravators of systemic invisibility, the things that either exemplify it or make it worse. And on the top of the diagram are the things that are the alleviators, things that help. So of the aggravators, there's maybe one major node, and that is power dynamics, maybe arrogance, it's sometimes experienced, and also scarcity, the absence of services, and an us and them kind of feeling or being unvalued. And unpaid carers told me stories of feeling coerced or being dismissed, or people were being unresponsive or services were unavailable. Stuff like Barnard Castle and Partygate, heard a lot of anger in relation to that. How COVID shut services down, and also cost of care. And in paid care staff, this showed up too. Unworkable rules in care homes, inadequate pay, moral distress, trying to work with unworkable rules, systems and structures, the higher ups, if you like, the guidance coming down from government, unresponsive to feedback, and also systems of checking or guidance being quite imposing or threatening. So these things make systemic invisibility worse in both cases. And then the sub-themes of things that we're helping, that we're alleviating that systemic invisibility. There's a persistence and a battling, courage that is showed by unpaid carers. Support was very helpful. So practical support, being listened to, availability, advocacy, family. Family was an interesting one, not always an alleviator. Things like mindfulness, when people were practitioners of mindfulness, they told me how it helped them. Things that had meaning and purpose, maybe that's faith, or it could be other things that really felt supported people, and the appreciation of learning. And then on the paid staff side, team cohesion was really helpful. So that's support, and that encouraged courage as well, togetherness, also meaning, purpose, and faith. So similar themes showing up in different ways, depending on the kind of role. And those came together in these overarching themes of community solidarity, so team cohesion in the case of paid care staff, and common humanity. That's the recognition that we're all human beings, and we're interacting with each other, and we're hearing one another. So here's my tidier one. And really the story is that common humanity and community solidarity counter the systemic invisibility of carers and people living with dementia. So listening, supporting, learning, meaning, purpose, and teamwork really counter this experience of invisibility or voicelessness. And that also can help alleviate, how carers feel they need to compensate for failing systems. When this support is in place, they maybe don't need quite as much persistence because something is being looked after, feel less trapped and more free when support is there. And emotional impacts are also reduced when common humanity and community solidarity are there. So I'd like to share now some of what people said, and how I got to these themes from what people said. So let me so for example, looking at common humanity specifically, we are all humans and in it together. In relation to listening as a sub-theme. So this is Katrina, a family carer, and she's talking about her experience of taking part in the interview for the research. She says, I really noticed quite a bit of sadness as I talked with you, but it was also actually really helpful. It was clarifying. It really helped to be able to share about the guilt and the relief. That very much helped. Yes, thank you. And Betty, who worked in a paid care role, she says, this is also talking about her experience of being interviewed with the research. It's been really good. It might sound stupid, but it feels like a big weight's been lifted off my shoulders. Do you know what it's like? It's actually made me feel better. Just even sitting, listening, and things like that. So that's all it takes. And that's what I try and say to the management and the seniors. It's not hard. Just come and listen to us. That's all we ask. But I do feel relieved. I feel better. Talking sense. And then in terms of listening, this is also now beginning to connect in with meaning and purpose. I'm also connected with creativity, which popped up several times in the interviews, and this sense of mutual belonging. And this time, this is Maria. And Maria works in a community care setting in two ways, one a community project and the other is in a care home. And she's talking about people who are coming to her community, regular weekly events. And she's explaining how she's arranged the room. Yeah. She says, I feel that physical space gives them a little more feeling of freedom of movement. And this lady, she's talking about two who come, has this conversation, which probably some people, you know, don't understand, but they connect beautifully, the two of them. And when she gets agitated, then I'll put on some jazzy music that she likes because she loves to dance. She used to be a dancer, and I'll ask her to lead our exercises for that morning, lead our movement. So we'll put on the music and I'll ask her, you know, do you want to do this song first or this song first? And she'll choose and we'll follow her. And at the end of every session, and when she says goodbye, she says, I really feel like I belong someplace. Mutual belonging, common humanity. And here's Betty again. And this is the role of support or team cohesion in care work. So community solidarity is really showing through here. And we all got through it. She means COVID. It was hard, but we did get through it. And it just ended up that we were having like our lunch in that. We just sat in the lounge with the residents. We made them a cup of tea. It was basically like we were just all having a big break together. So luckily, I was in that home with actually a good working team. So which makes it easier. And we were all there for each other. We gave each other support. And then there was also another element of using freedom to make choices for, and this is Lauren's words about her experience within the care home of working with unworkable rules and what happened to do something different than the unworkable rules. And she's talking really about creating freedom. I mean, I remember at one point as well, we had a lady who'd not long come into the care home, and obviously she was going through a period of adjustment, and COVID hit. Suddenly her family, who were everything to her, were taken away from her. And at that time, she also had a new grandchild that she had never seen, and she just stopped eating and drinking. She just wasn't interested anymore. We took the decision to take her to the back door and let her son come to her with a great grandchild. And seeing her reaction, knowing that he had done everything beforehand was empowering for us because we felt we were doing the right thing again. We were using our freedom again to be able to make a choice for. And I think that we got braver in those decisions. So Lauren's experience here is also really flagging up the courage element. So there's a risk to not following the guidance that could impact someone's job. So the courage is needed and is closely related to the creation of freedom here. And then there is the idea of both common humanity and community solidarity, of not carrying things alone. And this is Katrina, a family carer. I get the sense of not having much freedom if you don't know what the support networks may or may not be, and having more freedom when you know. Before we found out about our local community centre, things seemed more closed in. But once we found out about their dementia support, we were getting out and socializing more. It's definitely support with a care. So feeling like there's a team, a social connection, instead of carrying that on your own. And then there's the idea of, and this is one of the carers, family carer, who said outright, support is freedom. So I'm saying the support is freedom. It is somebody asking to assist me, to help my wife to do things, or maybe just freeing up time for me to do other things. The support allows you to do the things rather than being a carer takes freedom away. It is about the community helping people to care for themselves. They may be a lot more focused with the care service about care homes, but caring in the home is just as important as it is in care homes. Maybe more so, because people probably from a starting position don't realize what they need to do to make that care in the home work. So I'm now going to make a kind of a big leap here from the themes that we've been exploring about common humanity and community solidarity and into things that are indicated from these findings towards what's needed. And what people told me through that set of experiences that we need spaces that are local to where they are, hyper-local spaces, what I call them, values-led, spaces for listening, resting, learning, connecting. And they need to provide reliable and sustained accompaniment and support through every stage of dementia, because people's experiences are fragmented, can't find stuff, and that also provide responsive and skilled care when that becomes necessary in later stages of dementia. So really, it's community solidarity, which is underpinned by common humanity, community listening. This third point here about collaborative working with meeting centers and the National Development Team for Inclusion is my own personal way at the moment where I'm developing this idea through a grant application to be able to work with this responsive and skilled care in communities. And so that's something that is one of the directions that I'm taking to begin to help this happen more. So listening and common humanity are precious. And I don't know how many of the people and what kind of roles that you're in who are listening. Perhaps you can tell me. Some of you will be therapists, but not everyone here, I think, is a therapist. But just so you know, because sometimes it can really feel like we're up against things that are so big that we can't fix. Listening and common humanity are very precious and crucial. So never underestimate the difference you're making when you are hearing someone. Can stop there.
Oh, Martha, that I find myself feeling incredibly moved by some of the words that you've shared, and I really appreciate you sharing both your working and your sort of process, and also the words of the people that you involved in your research. And I wondered if it's okay for me to kick off with a question first before I open this up. Which is my curiosity about how, or if your training and your experience as a kind of Rogerian person-centered counselor informed your way of going about the research.
Oh, yeah. I love being able to think about that, Rebecca. And interestingly enough, that is something that I will need to be writing in the current thing that I'm writing. So I'm currently writing chapter 6 of 7. So this thesis is being turned in autumn this year. And I will need to say something about, my approach and particularly way of being with people in the interviews. So far, what I've been writing about, it's the words of the people speaking that have taken precedence, but I will need to say something too about how I was listening. And it was interesting to read back transcripts of myself listening.
Mm-hmm.
And my person-centered training, I have to say, really was obvious. So the way I would often reflect back something which would encourage someone to say something more. And that's, so common in the person-centered way of working. It was like, I'm really hearing this, it sounds like that was very hard for you and quite emotional. And I wonder what that was like, and someone would say a little bit more. In the interviews, I had a kind of, so they were semi-structured really. I had a set of open questions that I started about, what does freedom mean to you in the context of caring? But then it would go where it went. And I said that to people. I said, we can, if something that I ask, one of these questions isn't something of your own experience that connects with you, we go where you go.
Mhm.
And then that felt quite person-centered way of working as well, of didn't want to dictate what people ought to be thinking about and kind of go with it, but equally there was a starting point.
Mhm.
And that is maybe a bit different from person-centered working, and also within qualitative analysis is, qualitative working, that's not always where people start. I had this question at the beginning about freedom, which is not the case of all qualitative research. So yeah, it was really important to the interviews and how things were for me, and but not the only thing that was woven into those interviews.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I could feel it just even in the way you presented your material.
Mm.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you so much. I'd really like to open this up for other folks here tonight to ask some questions or to bring some ideas or comments. And if you want to just pop your little yellow hand up or whatever's easiest. Anyone got a question? Yeah, John.
Not so much a question, just one of the bits that I really loved, Martha, was the response from the team to the leadership team that it's not that hard. You just have to come and hear what we've got to say. Just come and listen to us. And
Yeah.
it's such a great reminder in organizations that of all different kinds that we can just easily get so busy doing the task of the organization, and we lose that bit. But in the losing of it, we can lose the whole organization, really. So
Yes.
I just love that reminder, and like so core to what was going on in the context that you were hearing about, but and so important everywhere. So thank you, Martha.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I hear that, John. And it was really interesting. So was only able to show a little bit of what Betty had said there. Actually, she was quite specific that the support that she had within the care home was with her other fellow care workers. And we got a little bit of an idea that it was a bit more difficult with the management then in terms of that feeling of support. That theme emerged in a few different places, and then people who were talking to in management would also talk about the struggle of what it was like to have guidance or inspection come from higher up from them. So that upward, that listening from people who are in positions where they need to look out for things like, or how things are done, does seem to present a particular barrier to hearing who might be subject to what that guidance or is. And that's really an important dynamic. And where in care homes where there is good communication between the management and the staff, of all the staff in the home, really made a big difference to the quality of life of the workers there. Yeah. So thank you, Don.
There's a really good
Thank you.
question here from Cassandra. When interviewing the carers, did you notice shame as a barrier to that collective solidarity at all?
This is a really intriguing question, Cassandra. I don't know if it's possible to ask you about a little bit more about what you mean by a barrier to collective solidarity.
Oh,
Like people get inward. Oh, right. Okay.
struggling to
Yeah.
unmute
So
yourself.
here's my guess. People maybe get a bit inward focused, or they are very caught up in guilt, say, of not being able to do something as a carer that they would like to be able to do, and so therefore get quite lonely, and find it hard then to connect with the experience of others because they feel like they're the only one who's maybe doing something wrong. So in some sense or other, the answer is yes. I definitely saw that. People maybe find it harder to imagine that they can reach out for help when they feel like they're doing something wrong. Equally, it's a bit hard in some of what people were telling me to disentangle the experiences of frustration of not finding service help and barriers that might exist to feeling supported.
Yeah. Thanks. Cassandra says
Yeah.
she thinks Martha's now answered it beautifully.
Okay.
Was there anything else you wanted to add to that, Cassandra?
Now I can unmute. Sorry, I can't put my
No.
camera on, but thank you so much. Yeah, I guess I'm just sitting here thinking about that. Because what gets in the way to reaching out and forging solidarity across difference, and I'm also just thinking about cultural implications around carers, and I guess you sparked a lot of thoughts in my mind. I'm not being very articulate, but thank you.
Thank you, Cassandra, for the question. Yeah. Actually, I'm seeing here that in the chat there's a question. Rebecca, is there a hand up, or am I missing anything, or shall I go straight to the question?
Yeah, no, I think Esther's got a question there in the chat. Yep.
Okay, yeah. So Esther, I'm interested in how, if any, or applicable to your interviewees, the impacted of care homes being places of care and also places of profitable business. Yes. Unpaid carers, when their care experience involved needing the person they were caring for to be in a care home, that experience could have been traumatic on several levels, and shared experiences of that. And sometimes the coercion that I spoke about happened during the process of someone going in to live in a care home, and the family carer not wanting the person to go and live in a care home and wanting the support to be at home. And at first being told that in theory, yes, it was possible to have 4 visits a day from the home care team. And then saying, well, that's great. Yes, come and have 4 carers. And then the care service, care home team saying, well, we can't do that because that's the maximum number of visits and we can't increase it. So therefore you can't have that. And then the multidisciplinary team, which was gathered around basically saying, we need you to say you want your wife to go into care home. Now, he didn't want his wife to go into care home, but the coercion aspect was there. And then he told me the story of what it was like to try to have conversations with care homes, which their first question is, we can't actually speak to you unless you have X amount of money in the bank. So that's for private care. So yes, this was the care home transition experience was definitely present in the interviews and part of the distress about the systemic invisibility of things, and the difficulty of obtaining the services that are needed or are actually the preference of a family.
Wow. That's really powerful, just hearing you say that. Yeah. Charlotte has come in with a question here. Well, I think it's sort of 2 questions. The first being, what were the differences between how unpaid carers viewed community support and those who were in paid caring roles? And there's a second question about, did participants have a preference for having their faces recorded or not? And was curious about, did it make a difference whether, in recording their video or not?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm pondering over that first part of the question, how unpaid carers viewed community support and those who were in paid caring roles. Yes and no. So people I spoke to who were living in care homes were talking about community support in relation to the family members of the people who are residents of their care home.
Mhm.
So they talked a lot about their efforts to try to involve the family. And that was a major element of the support that they were trying to encourage. So they shared a lot about that. Maria, who's this community care worker who had two different types of things going on, one which is her voluntary setup and the other was in a care home. She talked about how her challenge was helping people to keep their freedom in COVID and not saying no to everything and finding ways to do it instead. She wasn't exactly talking about care in the home, although she talked quite a lot about what she did to link in with services that delivered food at home during that time. So she would get hold of the person from like the food train who was going into the house and say, would you just switch on the Zoom, please, while you're there? So someone can take part. Unpaid carers, when they talked about community support, were often talking about services that weren't available.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't really talk about family as support as such. They talked about family in terms of dynamics rather than as support. So yeah, I would say similar and different. And then the question about not recording participants' faces. In their information that was sent out about taking part in the study in the first place, the information sheet said it's going to be audio recorded. So I didn't give them a choice, I guess. I just said it was going to be audio recorded. That was because in the ethics process, which was quite long and involved, there's quite a difference in what felt the ethics committee could accept by way of what's kept and what's not. So chose audio recording for that reason. And nobody said anything about wishing they would have had a different opportunity, but I guess I don't know what would have happened if I'd offered them the choice. So yeah.
Thank you very much, Martha. That was a great talk. I really enjoyed it. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Are there any other questions? I'm struggling to see. Let's see if there's any other hands up here. All right. Sarah has a hand up.
Hello, Martha.
Hello, Sarah.
Hi, thank you for that. I have a question which I'm going to articulate really badly because I've just been sitting trying to make it work, but I can't really. But I think it speaks to John's comment about just listening and also to Esther's question about care homes being profitable and the kind of context in which care happens. And it's something about keeping, as you did on what you called your messy diagram, but I don't think that's messy. You should see some of my mind maps. Like that was neat. But something about keeping that sense of systemic invisibility at the center and not pathologizing individuals or families. And when we say, you know, when a member of a care home is saying, I just need the management to listen, that makes it sound so simple, but it's not in an industry that it requires time for listening, and time mostly doesn't get factored into what you do, right? It's not profitable. Time to listen is not profitable. So I'm going to ask you, I'm so sorry to ask you a complex wiki question in this sort of environment, but like, what can we do about that? We just need to have more time for care. So how can we make that happen?
Yeah. It's a great question. It's like one of the questions, I would have to say. It's related to another question in a different way, related to another question that one of the unpaid carers asked me as part of the interview. He says, who are you trying to influence? Or who do you want to influence? And I thought, yep, that is a great question. It's key, of course. And the answer is there are several routes by which one could influence things, or potentially influence things, or not influence things, as the case may be, or feel like you're fighting. So in the end, in my own personal realm of people that I'm working with, I'm leaning towards the ones who are really encouraging voices to be heard and valued no matter what the voice is. And they are making space where people are heard and involved. So Dimension Meeting Centers, so this is the model that's come from the Netherlands and is now expanding across Scotland. There are now like 8 or 9 meeting centers in Scotland, have a way of working that is designed to be, I suppose you could call it democratic, but inclusive. So on their steering committees, they always have 3 people who are living with a diagnosis of dementia, 3 people who are unpaid carers, and 3 people who are a member of the organization. And they're designed to be spaces where people can come and be together in peer support. And they do all sorts of creative things. And within meeting center models, all sorts of other things happen around meeting centers. So the research ideas that I'm now working with the National Development Team for Inclusion, who have worked with people with learning disabilities, where we'll try and do that in conjunction with meeting centers. And meeting centers have a way then of drawing people to them who go out to places like care homes to find creative and interesting things that involve people in the homes, and they provide listening space. So including to staff, and projects that I've been involved in that are creative in nature in care homes have a profound effect because the staff feel heard and they feel the power of it, and it changes something for them too, or it can do, of 1, feeling supported, and 2, what's possible within just a few minutes of listening. But there's so much more though, Sarah, as you say. What can we do about it? And I'd really like to see, as I'm going forward, connecting with places, you know, who might have people who are listeners who can provide the time, maybe voluntarily. During my care work years, I was placed sometimes in care homes, and what I did there sometimes, because I didn't know anything about the home, was I helped people eat. I helped someone eat, and most of the staff don't have time for that. Because I wasn't really helpful in any other capacity, that's what I did. But actually, I think that would be helpful just more generally, of people who can go in and be alongside. And so that's something else that I really want to encourage happen in some of those things where I'm trying to influence people is connect with organizations or people who can maybe think of ways to do that.
Mhm.
Thank you.
Long-winded answer, Sarah.
Yeah.
Good answer though. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Cassandra's just named something here, which I think, yeah, really speaks to me, feels very powerful. And she says, I'm also curious about staff being resistant to the listening because they don't necessarily have the capacity to hear the harm caused by the system they work under. Feelings of being powerless in such a complicated system. I'm thinking of moral injury as a barrier to being able to tolerate the just listening. Yeah. Yeah.
100%. I'm going to say, when I worked in care work, I did it for a year, agency care work. I actually found it almost unbearable to do the 2 things together. So the care staff that I've met and, you know, who participated in my study, full of so much admiration for what they managed. Because when I was a care worker, I find it so hard because people mostly wanted to speak to me and I'd feel so comfortable listening, and I found that so hard to connect with doing the practical tasks that I was being asked to do. And I found it also very intensive to try to do both the physical care and also the listening that I wanted to do. So I can absolutely see that in the end I had to teach myself not to listen, to feel like I want to survive there. I taught myself a way of being bright and breezy and practical. I'm not a very practical person, and I taught myself to be bright and breezy and practical. And I wonder, in terms of survival, of other people maybe experience that too. And I'm not sure. And so to be able to create spaces where it's safe for care staff to be heard, and two, where there might be support for them to be able to take the time to listen and not have that not be a threat from the system, I think would be an incredible thing.
Yeah. I think there are two final questions that have come into the chat, and we probably have just about time to sort of touch on both of them before we break up for our short break. From Shirley, who asked, was it relevant to explore how the carer cared for relationship changed over time?
Absolutely. It's something that I wasn't able to get the best insight into from a one-off interview, but it absolutely is. And the people that I work with in the Edinburgh Centre for Research on the Experience of Dementia really do some wonderful work with people living with dementia directly, of their experience of how things change, and also with carers. And I would have loved to have been able to include both. Again, it was an ethics process, which meant that I couldn't, and it's too long a story to explain here why I couldn't do that. But it really affects people's experience of everything. And when there are supportive ways to work with people, it can really change the tension that there may otherwise be in that relationship, or change that can help them.
Yeah. Thanks, Martha. And finally from Esther, and I think we'll just sort of, this might be a question to launch us into the community chat afterwards. To what extent does this situation highlight broader patterns in how society values and supports older adults and people with disabilities? Does this reflect broader societal issue in how we treat an aging population and
Yes.
marginalized groups like the disabled community, particularly in terms of dignity, visibility, and access?
Yeah, it absolutely does. So when I'm writing up my findings, I'm linking it in with all that research, especially around human rights, and it mirrors that pattern, and the gathering together of resources from all sorts of communities can be really helpful in countering that in the human rights frame, especially social and economic rights.
Yeah, absolutely. And it really, there's something in, what the words of your people are saying is like freedom is in community and in connection and in mutual reliance. It's not on
Right.
individuality or individualism and disconnection.
That's right. Absolutely.
So powerful. Yeah. All right. So that takes us to 6 o'clock. We are going to pause for a moment, let everybody go and get a quick cup of tea, a comfort break for 5 minutes. We will come back together for the community space. Unfortunately, Martha, I know you have to leave us just now, so I want to say thank you so much for a really I found very moving talk. I really appreciate you sharing that with us and coming to task, and I think it's giving all of us a lot of sort of food for thought. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Yeah, I wish I could stay. I'm going to speak to my mother on Zoom.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah. Do some more listening.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, Martha, thank you so much.
All right. Yeah. Thank you.
And we'll see the rest of you, hopefully, or some of you in 5 minutes or so.